North Carolina. Good evening and welcome to this special edition of Weather Center. I'm Dan Atkinson. We continue to monitor Hurricane Bonnie, and we have team coverage of the event. Let's begin with some pictures out of North Carolina. The streets of Wilmington, North Carolina are deserted as the storm rages all around it. Street signs are no match for the hurricane-force winds experienced by the coastal city. Residents are staying safe in evacuation centers and with inland friends. Winds from Hurricane Bonnie whipped up the waves at Wrightsville Beach, North Carolina. That's along the coast just east of Wilmington. Trees have been blown down, blown over, and boats bounced around the water, and docks were damaged. There have been wind gusts of more than 75 miles per hour. And with all the rain resulting in saturated ground and the high winds, trees are being uprooted. There are power outages and very treacherous conditions along the Carolina coast, particularly southeastern North Carolina at this time. And the hurricane, unfortunately, has slowed its movement, and it looks like it's going to be a long night. Here's a look at current radar, and we'll put it into motion, and you can see certainly the spiral rain bands and the counterclockwise circulation around the center of the hurricane, which is roughly over Cape Fear, North Carolina, south of Wilmington, just south of Wilmington. It is moving very slowly, and as it does so, let's take a look at the coordinates for Hurricane Bonnie as of 6 p.m. It was estimated to be centered near latitude 34.1 degrees north, longitude 77.9 west, or about 15 miles south of Wilmington, North Carolina. That would be around Cape Fear. Maximum sustained winds continue to be about 115 miles per hour. Those are offshore, fortunately, but there are still damaging wind gusts in southeastern North Carolina, commonly reported wind gusts of 60 to 70 miles per hour. And the storm is moving to the north at about 8 miles per hour with central pressure 963 millibars. Well, Jim Cantori is standing by in the area around Morehead City, North Carolina, and has been buffeted considerably by the strong winds. Jim, what's happening with you now?
Well, Dan, I mean, we get a break from the hurricane gusts, and we're still, though, very strong tropical storm force gusts, 65 miles an hour plus. And we've heard word as well that across this sound that you're seeing here, this is Bogue Sound, by the way, and if you can just make it out faintly in the back, those are the Bogue Banks or the Barrier Islands. So you're heading out that way, about 2.5 miles to the Atlantic Ocean. Now, Atlantic Beach, where we were yesterday, there have been reports of structural damage. I don't know if that's major structural damage, just simply a report of structural damage. The piers that we showed you yesterday, there has been damage to those as well. Apparently someone could get out and look at that, so that's how we got the report. Also here, about 50% of Carteret County is out of power. 50% of the folks have lost power here, and that was about an hour ago. So some big problems here, and as long as these winds continue to crank, Dan, it is going to be extremely difficult, if not impossible, for power crews to get out and do some repairs to get power back. So it's going to be a while. Back to you.
Thanks a lot, Jim. We'll be checking back with you. And here in the Forecast Center, we are joined by Weather Channel hurricane expert John Hope. John, as we have seen on radar, the good bit of the eye is still really out over water. And what significance is there to be placed in that fact?
Quite a lot, Dan. As long as a lot of that eye is over water, then it's not going to wind down very fast, and that kind of worries us a little bit. We can see on the Doppler radar here, it's very clearly where the eye is now, and where you see this heavy precipitation at the end there, that's the northwest eye wall, if you will. But a lot of the eye itself is over the water, and it looks like it's going to stay that way for a while. It is moving north, but very slowly. It might be nudging a little bit east. And notice, Dan, up here farther north, I wanted to point out we have some very wicked-looking thunderstorms. And it's in some of those bands, typically, that we get tornadoes associated with hurricanes, rather than in near the center of the hurricane itself. So right up in here, we need to watch out because those thunderstorms are nasty.
And John, you mentioned the possibility of tornadoes. Northern Bertie County and southern Hertford counties are now under tornado warnings until 10 past 7. And we've already received some reports of some tornado touchdowns in southeastern North Carolina, moving toward the northwest.
And bear in mind, instead of the usual direction that we see where tornadoes move from west to east, these move from southeast to northwest around the circulation of the hurricane.
Well, as the winds batter the coast, here are the warnings, the hurricane warnings in effect now, from Cape Romaine, South Carolina, up to the North Carolina-Virginia border.
And we want to point out there's been a change there because the hurricane warnings themselves have been discontinued north of the North Carolina-Virginia border, but they've been replaced by tropical storm warnings and the hurricane watch. So they haven't given up entirely on the concept of possible hurricane threat even up there.
Well, John, we have on the line now Tom Ditt. Mr. Ditt is the North Carolina Emergency Management, or with the North Carolina Emergency Management Agency. Mr. Ditt, thank you for joining us here on Weather Center. I have a question for you. Do you have any word on the flooding in the areas, and is it causing more evacuations inland?
The flooding along Highway 12 in Ocracoke has flooded approximately 6 miles of that highway on the northern port of Ocracoke. We're getting heavy rain to the west of Wilmington. We're going to expect around 12 inches of rain there tonight. Well, you and John were talking about the tornadoes. We've had several touchdowns. We had a fire department in Duplin County that lost their building. But fortunately, we did get the fire trucks out.
Well, what do you know about power outages, and how might that be affecting emergency services?
Scattered power outages in some counties, up to 80% power outages in other counties, but the crews are working as hard as they can, but in a safe manner when they can get out. But right now, we're trying to batten down with this storm just off of Wilmington and try to ride it out.
Well, thank you very much. Tom Ditt with the North Carolina Emergency Management Agency. Appreciate your insight into what's happening there in an area where the weather is bad now and not soon to improve. John, we've been looking during the afternoon and on into the evening now at the infrared satellite views, color enhanced, and it shows us there's still a lot of convection offshore, isn't there?
There is indeed, especially southeast of the eye, or center is right in there, and you see this dark red offshore, a lot of that. And then up here north are these other thunderstorm bands that we talked about.
Now, the rain is falling heavily. Of course, the slow movement of the hurricane is going to mean that a lot of rain is going to accumulate, maybe in some cases. Well, already we've gotten reports of as much as maybe 12 inches of rain in some areas.
And
right?
Certainly 20 inches wouldn't be totally unexpected in a lot of areas there, I'm afraid.
And the winds that are battering the area, here's the wind profile. Tropical storm force winds extending out 230 miles from the center. Hurricane force winds extending out 115 miles from the center. So this is still a large and dangerous hurricane, Category 3.
And those distances, of course, are from the center on out east over the open water. They don't extend quite so far inland there.
Well, in an area where the winds are buffeting is Bill Keneally at Wrightsville Beach, just east of Wilmington. Bill, what's the latest where you are?
And things, thankfully, are a little settled down here now, but I do want to remind everybody, you have to get out now, because at 8 o'clock there is a curfew that applies to not only Wilmington, but the entire New Hanover County area. So if you got to get your business done, take care of it. If you're heading out of a shelter, maybe heading home, do so now. The other message I want to get out is the folks here, the mayor's office and the public information officer held a meeting. They are now inspecting damage on the island, on Wrightsville Beach, the barrier island itself, and they should be back shortly. We should get some pretty good information out of them regarding how the area has sustained Hurricane Bonnie. Now, the other problems I see tonight, we still have the northeast wind. We have another high tide approaching the midnight hour. That could be a problem. If you're out there, you're not supposed to be, but if you are out there, be careful by the water. The other news is if the rain does linger with the very saturated ground and the wind, we could have a lot more in the way of falling trees. So Dan, right now we're in pretty good shape, but we're going to brace for possibly some deteriorating conditions again later on tonight. You get the video? Okay. Got pictures from Greater Wilmington, I'm sorry. And once again, the folks out there were coping, dodging trees, signs down, we had power lines down, a whole lot of debris in the area. The situation is not much better. There's not much in the way of road crew out there to improve the situation, so please use caution tonight. Back to you, Dan.
All right, well.
And thank you very much, Bill. Appreciate the word you have there. Now we move up the coast to Nags Head, where Jeff Morrow is standing by. Jeff, what's the latest from your viewpoint?
All right, Dan. Well, our viewpoint has gotten a lot higher here since we talked to you this afternoon. It is starting to get dark outside, but it's still light enough that we can pan up the beach here, and you can see how the ocean is mostly foamy out about 300 to 400 yards offshore here. Waves breaking well offshore. I'd have to say that we have at least 12-foot breakers well off there at about 300 to 400 yards. And way out on the horizon, sometimes we see some waves breaking, which are about a half mile to a mile out. Looking at that radar that John was showing, the Doppler radar that you and John were showing, that's getting a little bit disconcerting. I just heard the emergency management
Good evening and welcome to this special edition of Weather Center. I'm Dave Schwartz. We continue to monitor Hurricane Bonnie near the North Carolina coast tonight, and we have team coverage of the event coming up here in just a couple of minutes. Let's begin with some video from North Carolina taken earlier today. The trees and the streets of Wilmington, North Carolina are being windblown and they're deserted as the storm rages around it tonight. Street signs are no match for the hurricane force winds experienced by the coastal city. Residents are staying safe in evacuation centers and inland with friends. Winds from Hurricane Bonnie whipped up the waves at Wrightsville Beach, North Carolina. That's along the coast too, just east of Wilmington. Trees have been blown over, boats were bounced around the water, docks were damaged. There have been wind gusts to over 75 miles an hour here at Wrightsville Beach and in town in Wilmington. Here's where it is right now at this very second. We'll check on the eye of the hurricane here on our radar and get your bearings here. Here's Charleston, South Carolina. We've had some wind and clouds today, but nothing rough. Here in Norfolk, Virginia, also some wind to about 25 miles an hour and clouds. But in between these two cities, that's where the roughest weather is. And you'll notice right here, the eye has hardly moved. Over the last several hours, it's staying close to the coast. There's plenty of rain and wind and water sloshing into North Carolina. Well, we have team coverage right now. Two of our on-camera meteorologists are on the scene. One is in Nags Head, one in Wrightsville, North Carolina. We are going to Wrightsville, North Carolina with Bill Keneally first. Bill, what do you have?
And Dave, good evening to you again. We're here in Wrightsville Beach. We are on the mainland side of Wrightsville Beach. We have not heard how the barrier island has fared. We should get the information within the hour. We can see the rain still falling. It's that typical tropical rain, real fine, but it does tend to collect after a while, believe me. And checking out the angle here, it looks like it's still a northeast wind, so that reminds me of the next high tide. 11 o'clock is our high tide, and with that northeast wind still angling in, I would watch out on the sound. We could have some more sound side flooding, especially as we get into the latter evening hours. The other news is the video we have for you. We shot earlier today pictures of damage in the area. Now, the damage wasn't catastrophic. A lot of trees down, a lot of power lines down. I know from experience our power was out a while ago. It's been on, going on 12 hours without power, without cable, without phone. So you get the song and dance here. But again, if you're out there tonight, you better have a darn good reason. The curfew is officially in effect for the city of Wilmington as well as all of New Hanover County. That curfew goes until 6 o'clock in the morning. Hopefully things a bit better up the coast, but my suspicion is things will be deteriorating in the Nags Head area. Let's get a report now from Jeff Morrow. Good evening, Jeff.
Oh, good evening, Bill. And as things are slowly quieting down where you are, things have been quiet here pretty much all during the day today. Pretty high surf, but again, the beaches here where I am at Nags Head all the way down to Hatteras are actually facing more east and even northeast here at Nags Head. So we're not feeling the full effect of the waves. They're kind of coming in at a southern angle, if you will. It's been real high surf, about 8 to 12 feet in some of the breakers, and it's breaking about 300 to 400 yards offshore, even farther, some of the real big waves. We have had reports of a lot of overwash on Ocracoke Island. That is actually a south-facing beach or south-facing island. A couple of miles of Highway 12 down there. That's an island that is only accessible by ferry, or evidently underwater, some of Highway 12 there. Also on Hatteras Island, I would not be surprised at high tide tonight that maybe a couple of areas just between Frisco and Hatteras may overwash, particularly around the Hatteras Pier area as well. Might get some overwash at high tide tonight as the winds are coming on shore. Not too much rain here today, but we expect more overnight tonight and tomorrow. We will let you know. Right now, let's go back to Dave.
Well, thanks so much for that live report, Jeff. You guys have done a yeoman's job out there today. We appreciate it. Well, there are some folks who are riding this hurricane out by heading inland, way inland. That's where the weather is much better, say out in Hickory, North Carolina, for example. But other people are riding this one out at sea. And we're going live to one of them. This is Lieutenant Commander Pat Waring of the USS Enterprise. That's the one at sea. The ship is 300 miles east of Virginia Beach. Lieutenant Commander Waring, do you read me? This is Dave Schwartz at the Weather Channel.
Yes, I do. I'm here.
What conditions did you go through last night and this morning as you were on your way out to sea?
We had very near calm conditions as we left Norfolk yesterday evening. However, relatively soon after leaving the coastline, we started getting increasingly higher winds and seas. And shortly after sunrise this morning, we passed through a fairly large rain band where we had over 50 knots of wind with about 16 to 18 foot seas and heavy rain as well.
Can you describe your current conditions outside the ship right now?
Currently we have about 12 to 14 foot seas with a southerly wind at about 30 knots. With our distance from the storm, this gives you a good idea of how vast the area of influence Bonnie has right now.
It certainly is. Lieutenant Commander Pat Waring, thanks so much for that live, exclusive report for an interesting way to avoid this hurricane, head far out to the east. Well, with me right now is our meteorology supervisor, Stu Ostro. Stu, you've had your eyes on these hurricanes now for years and years, a Penn State grad. What is your take on this hurricane, and what does it look like it's doing right now?
The main message that we want to get to the folks in North Carolina right now is that while the eye did reach the coast this afternoon, that does not mean that the show's over and they can let their guard down. For one thing, the eye never really made it completely onshore. It's still wobbling around just offshore, so we have the ongoing wind and water problems along the coast. Also, in some of the outer rain bands, we have the threat for tornadoes, and there's been a couple of reports of them already. And as we go into the future, the potential for extremely heavy rains and flooding.
Well, perhaps we can take a look at this hurricane. We've got it on Doppler radar right now, and you can give us your analysis.
We do see the eye of the hurricane right in here. This is North Carolina, South Carolina down there. There's the eye of the hurricane. And as we just mentioned, it's just wobbling along very slowly, still trying to get inland, but just sort of creeping up along the coast. We have the very heavy rain that I alluded to, and then in these outer rain bands out here, that's where we typically would see tornadoes spin up, and folks who might experience an increase in the wind, it's not like in the plains where you might be out there and you can see the tornado far away. In this case, it's getting dark. They spin up very quickly. Observe the same sort of rules that you would in any other tornado or high wind situation. Get away from windows into an interior portion of the house if you think that something funny might be going on.
Well, you touched on a very important point. It is getting dark now. Trees and power lines will be coming down even inland for those of us who avoided this hurricane onshore. We've had heavy rain. A flood warning is in effect for Wilson County. Let's take a look at that. Doppler estimated radar totals of rain since this morning. You can see that coming in. Very heavy rain. There's the eye of it. Heaviest amounts of rain. And since this is moving so slowly, 20 inches of rain not out of the realm of possibility.
We hope that that worst case scenario does not happen, but unfortunately the steering flow around the hurricane is still very weak. It is not moving very quickly, and all signs point to a slow movement on through the day Thursday, and this hurricane has a lot of moisture with it. We've already seen those heavy rains, and we expect more of that to come.
A rainy and windy night in Raleigh, also Durham.
Indeed.
Well, thanks so much. Let's get the latest coordinates on this hurricane. I want us to see that first before we go back to the studio. Can we get that? There we are, the latest as of 6 p.m.
6 p.m., 34.1 north, 77.9. The most important things on here are that the maximum winds are still very strong, at least in gusts along the coast. It's moving very slowly, and the pressure is still down there. It's come up a little bit over the last few hours, but still some dangerous weather going on out there, and still a large and powerful hurricane.
Stu Ostro, meteorology supervisor here at the Weather Channel. Thanks so much for your wisdom and expertise. And I thank you for tuning into the Weather Channel. We're keeping a close eye on this hurricane. Obviously, it's a slow mover. The weather is going to be going downhill, too, if you live in Norfolk, Virginia. It'll get windy and rainy late tonight and tomorrow. It's going to be with us for the next couple of days. If you're away from your television, check us out on our website. Now back to the studio for a look at some rough weather and a check on Thursday's forecast.
Okay, Dave, thanks. Parts of Texas are still being plagued by problems from the remnants of Tropical Storm Charlie. Meanwhile, the Northeast is seeing its share of showers and thunderstorms. Let's go ahead and give you the big picture first of what's happening around the country. And we have a cold front that's working its way through the Northeast, and it has stalled out. And between that stalled front and Hurricane Bonnie to the south, there's a lot of moisture that has been lingering near southern areas of New England, and that is creating the possibility of some flooding.
Pay for this.
The new Subaru Forester. Sport utility tough, car easy.
Test drive the beauty of all-wheel drive at a Subaru dealer near you.
Why does Arm & Hammer Dental Care Clean Away Plaque better than regular toothpaste? New tests prove it. Like this golf ball, your teeth are filled with microscopic crevices. Arm & Hammer gets in these crevices to clean plaque away better. Feels like a dentist cleaning every time you brush.
Vogue Eyewear by Luxottica. What do you want people to see?
I want you to see where it all started. Growing up doesn't equal growing old.
I want you to see next year's trend.
Let them see you in Vogue Eyewear by Luxottica.
You can also get reliable forecasts from the Weather Channel through this radio station or newspaper. Many folks have evacuated as Hurricane Bonnie closes in on the Carolina coast. Find out where this dangerous storm is and its impact on Weather Center on the hour and
This July and August, when you order 4 pay-per-view movies, you could get the pay-per-view summer soundtrack CD free.
What am I supposed to do?
That's what I want to know.
Just send your name, address, and phone number with a copy of your cable bill indicating the purchase of 4 pay-per-view movies to this address.
Think we understand each other?
This CD is not available anywhere else and features music from pay-per-view's hot Hollywood hits. Summer fun is coming home.
Good times, friends, and noodle salad.
Hot tunes, cool movies. Order pay-per-view tonight.
If you're thinking about satellite TV, there's something you might not know. After you pay for the dish and the receiver and the installation, there's still one more thing you'll need. Programming. Let's face it, the shows you want to watch, that's what television's all about. With satellite TV, you may need to sign up with several different programming suppliers just to get the same top-rated channels you're enjoying now with Comcast, and that could actually cost you more. Think about it.
If you're considering satellite TV, you might want to think twice. Comcast, everything you connect with.
Every night we find a little more out about how the weather works and how it's going to turn out tomorrow. And that's what we bring to the viewers. It's the mystery of weather.
Right now, it's your local forecast on the Weather Channel.
It's time for Storm Watch. We cover what's happening in the tropics and what's happening back home in terms of severe weather. We'll give you a little idea of everything, including Bonnie, Danielle, and Howard. Bonnie, you're probably very familiar with. Hurricane Bonnie, as of 8 o'clock tonight, centered just south of Wilmington, North Carolina by 14 miles per hour. Maximum sustained wind still at 115 miles per hour. Now, it's close enough to the coast. It should begin to weaken later this evening. It's not moving, however, and as long as it remains over the water, that will allow it to maintain its current strength. Watches and warnings are still out in the same places they've been through the day, but I just wanted to remind you that we still have warnings along the coastline of North Carolina, watches on up into parts of the Chesapeake Bay area. And as we look at the latest radar, you can get a sense of where the eye is. Let's go ahead and right about here. It looks like the center of the hurricane's right along part of the water, part of the land, and it's expected eventually to move northward and move more inland. Now, the big problem with this is going to be the persistent heavy rain, the persistent gusty winds, the persistent high seas. So we are not out of the woods by any means here for quite some time as Bonnie is moving very slowly. That's what's happening with Bonnie. We'll have a complete update at the top of the hour. Want to let you know about Danielle. Hurricane Danielle, hurricane hunters were in there this afternoon and they found that the winds have actually weakened quite a bit. Danielle's experiencing some wind shear in the upper levels, and it looks like this may be a minimal hurricane, about 75 miles an hour, perhaps later on this evening. So that's some good news, but it is going to continue on this northwest-northwest track for another 24 hours, but weakening. Howard is also weakening out here in the Pacific as it's moving over cooler waters at about westerly, about 9 miles per hour, so that will continue. The other thing to let you know, heavy rains tonight in New England, some strong thunderstorms with winds and hail going to be a problem for parts of the plains. We'll have complete details at the top of the hour.
Stay with the Weather Channel for live reports as Hurricane Bonnie continues to make its way on shore. Weather Center is just ahead after your local forecast.
This program was sponsored by Rayovac Rechargeable Alkaline.
Batteries.
Video games don't just blast through your batteries, they blast through your money. That's why you should arm yours with Rayovac Maximum Alkaline. They pack long-lasting alkaline power but cost less.
How about a little one-on-one?
Rayovac Maximum.
I challenge you to a little one-on-one.
Hurricane Bonnie is still bashing the North Carolina coast with flooding rains, tornadoes, extremely large waves, and hurricane-force winds. It's moving slowly, and devastation will continue through the overnight hours. You are now looking at a live picture of the scene at Morehead City. That area has sustained a variety of damage, and we'll take you there live for the latest on the damage in just a few minutes. Good evening and welcome to this edition of Weather Center, a special edition covering Hurricane Bonnie, which has been approaching the United States now for about a week. And now it's pretty much stalled. We're looking for this thing to get out of here. But as you can see on our radar image, that there isn't much movement. If you pick out where the eye is, the center of circulation, which would be right in here, just to the east of Wilmington, North Carolina, it's just sitting and spinning. The upper level winds have not picked this up. Quite often they'll just scoot out this time of year, but this one's sitting and spinning, and that is creating some major problems for us in North Carolina and parts of South Carolina, and further up the coast too, where we're concerned. Well, Jim Cantori is standing by live in Morehead City, North Carolina, and he's taken the brunt of some tremendous winds and heavy rain. Jim, what's it look like there tonight?
Well, Dave, we continue to get the winds. The good news is they're a little less frequent. In other words, instead of getting hammered by tropical storm force winds, what we get is this little lull, which may last for a few minutes, and then the winds and the rain pick up again. So that's the kind of deal we're dealing with tonight. Again, you're looking through our night vision scope, which basically takes any of the ambient light around and enhances it. And that's what you're seeing here. Obviously, a much improved picture than what we show you if it was just plain dark. Now, we have lost power here where we are, and as a matter of fact, Carteret County, 50% of the island, or the county, excuse me, has lost power. As I look across the sound here, Dave, which is about 1.5 miles across, there is power. Occasionally it's blocked out because the rain squalls are so heavy, but there doesn't appear to be power on the barrier island. That is very good news. I can't give you any idea what the conditions are regarding the ocean front properties, but we have heard there is some structural damage over there, and there has also been some damage to the piers at Atlantic Beach and also at Pine Isle. So there may be some problems out that way, and I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, we have just been taking a hammering all day. I apologize if you already had stated the fact that this is different from Fran and Bertha. I was not able to hear you earlier on, but it is different. And the fact that instead of just coming on in and heading right out, this one's sitting here and hammering away and chewing up the seacoast. And not to mention, as long as these winds stay up, and the power remains out, not just here. I mean, this is a problem across a good chunk of eastern North Carolina, especially from where we are on southward. The power crews are not going to be able to get on out and restore the power. So we may have a problem with shelters eventually filling up a little bit later on. But for now, we're gonna grin and bear it here. And the good news is some of the heavier winds have calmed down, at least for now. Back to you, Dave.
Thanks a lot, Jim. Boy, I saw you earlier today on the Weather Channel. It was awesome. I'm glad the winds have died down where you are. Thanks so much for that live report. Well, as Jim just alluded to, this is a very slow-moving hurricane. It made a beeline across the Atlantic Ocean. Now it has slowed, and that's creating problems. And for some analysis, we go to our hurricane specialist, Mr. John Hope. And John, unlike those two hurricanes that Jim was making reference to, this is different.
He made a very key point there because this isn't moving rapidly at all. The center came in down here at Cape Fear about 5 o'clock Eastern Time. That's already 4 hours ago. And here is just barely, not quite up to Wilmington yet. So it is moving at a very slow rate of speed, Dave. We expect that slow rate to continue. And we are afraid that the center of this storm is going to be over North Carolina more than 24 hours.
So that creates problems in terms of?
Tremendous problems in terms of rain, because you can see this very heavy precipitation rotating about this center. And the other thing it does is it brings in, continues to bring onshore winds in up northeast of where the center is.
There have been some reports of tornadoes too, I understand, in North Carolina.
There have been reports of tornadoes, and I'm afraid there are going to be more. This very often happens when you have a landfalling hurricane. Here's the tornado watch, and that's effective until 5 a.m., I believe, tomorrow morning.
That's correct. So in the northeast quadrant of this hurricane.
And I should have said while I had the radar up there that they occur a ways away from the center. They don't normally occur around the eye. And not only that, they move around the periphery of the hurricane, which means they move from southeast to northwest, which is a different direction than most people look for tornadoes.
What about lightning and thunder? Will there be that?
There might be a little bit up there, but not much. Right around, I don't see much lightning reported at all around the core of the hurricane, which is also pretty typical.
And in addition to just isolated tornadoes, there's just a wide wind field. Part of this hurricane's offshore, but a lot of it is inland, not just on the coast.
A lot of it is inland. As we look at these gusts, you can see pretty good wind gusts now, up 45 miles an hour gusts well inland. And we do have a new advisory here we'll talk about in just a second.
Well, I'll tell you right now, we've got some more reports here from North Carolina for you. I want to go to them. Bill Keneally is standing by. And also we've got Jeff Morrow. They've been there all day long. And of course the surf has been a problem. Since it's dark, we can't see it, but what does it look like tonight, Jeff?
All right. Things are moving agonizingly slow here in the eastern portion of New Hanover County. The hurricane is offshore, yes it is, but it's just ever so slowly pulling off to our east. There's still a northeast wind, and there's still a big concern about the high tide here about 11 o'clock tonight, so that will be a major worry. In addition, power is out virtually all over the county. Pockets of power, as you can see, there's some power restored behind me, but not much. Check out the size of this tree back here, Dave. This guy is about as big a tree as I've ever seen fall during a hurricane. But we're actually coming along pretty good. I talked to the mayor a little while ago, Mayor Avery Roberts. He says it doesn't look near as bad as Fran. The wild card, though, is how much water actually got into people's homes. It is receding now, but they're not sure how much water is stuck in the homes or was actually in the homes at the time of the highest surge. So we'll have more for you on this, I'm sure, tomorrow. Let's get an update now up the coast from Nags Head, and let's turn it to Jeff Morrow. Jeff?
All right, Bill, and again, so far so good along most of the Outer Banks. Now, when you're talking Outer Banks, you're talking all the way down, including Ocracoke Island, and Ocracoke Island is not fared all that well. Again, that's an island that is only accessible by ferry boat, either from Swan Quarter or Cedar Island, or even from Hatteras Island, but that island has taken a lot of overwash on Highway 12. What we're looking at here now is some of the waves, the surf coming in here along the beach. We are coming up to a high tide at about 11:30 or so tonight, and at times these waves have been coming right up to the very base of the dune line, or what it kind of passing as a dune line here at the bottom of this hotel. So this hotel suffered a lot of undermining and damage during some nor'easters this past winter, and they're hopeful that hopefully that this hurricane doesn't do any more damage here. This high tide, probably not, but maybe tomorrow as the hurricane or what's left of it gets closer, there could be some more problems. In any event, we'll keep you updated here from the Outer Banks. So far so good for the northern banks, but that could change. Right now, let's go back to you, Dave.
That's right, Jeff. With a slow-moving hurricane, those waters will be slow to recede. Thanks so much for that report. We've got some new information from the National Hurricane Center, and John Hope has that. John?
Okay, this is the new information at 9 o'clock instead of 8 as the graphic shows. And a couple of things I wanted to point out. The hurricane warning south of Murrells Inlet to Cape Romaine, South Carolina has been changed now, downgraded to a tropical storm warning. Also, the wind is down a little bit. It's down to 105 miles an hour, Dave. We no longer have a Category 3 hurricane. That makes it a Category 2. And still, there has not been much movement at all. It's still just about the same. And that's still, they still advise us that the center is likely to be over North Carolina for at least another day. We're talking about another 24 hours.
So further weakening is expected.
Very slow, but weakening because that eye now on our radar seems to be just about inland, the best we can see.
Great. Heavy rain, though, still a problem.
Heavy rain is going to continue, and the slow movement makes that much worse because it's going to rain heavily over the same area for a longer time, and therefore more accumulation. 20 inches in some places, not out of the question.
Hurricane Specialist John Hope, thanks so much for your expertise. And thank you for tuning in for another edition of a Weather Center special edition on Hurricane Bonnie. If you're away from your television and don't have access to the Weather Channel, you can find us on our website right here online, 24 hours a day. Well, we got some weather here in the lower 48 aside from the hurricane, and I know that you might be interested in tomorrow's forecast. That's what Sharon Resulton has for you right now.
All right, there's some other weather to talk about across the country, starting with a string of severe storms moving across the plains. Good evening. From the studio, I'm Paul Emick, and welcome to this edition of Weather Center, being sponsored by Lowe's.
That's right, I'm Sharon Resulton. Heat is also becoming more of an issue again across the south, where several record temperatures were set today. We'll begin with the severe weather, and check this out. As we look at the current map, we'll find some stronger storms heading into the center of the nation. We'll also look into the northeast and find a little precipitation heading into southern portions of New England. Not as
Hurricane Bonnie still bashing the North Carolina coast with flooding rains, tornadoes, extremely large waves, and hurricane-force winds. It's moving very slowly, and the devastation will continue for the rest of tonight.
Nada.
You are now looking at live pictures at the scene here at Morehead City. That area has sustained a variety of damage, and we'll take you there live for the latest on the damage here in just a few minutes. Good evening and welcome to this special edition of Weather Center. I'm Dave Schwartz. Here at the Weather Channel, we've been keeping Hurricane Bonnie at the front of our minds here as it has approached the United States. Now it has stalled, and our hurricane specialist John Hope will let you know what you could be in for because of that eventuality. Jim Cantori has been standing by live all day long. If you've been watching the Weather Channel, you've seen him. He's at Morehead City, and I'll tell you, the winds have let up very seldom. You've been fighting them all day, and now tonight, Jim.
Dave, this is not the job for the weak at heart. Let's just put it that way. And no doubt it's been a rough day here. The big problem with this hurricane, besides the fact that it can knock you over if you're not prepared for it, is these winds are going to stay up. You mentioned the hurricane is stationary now. So instead of getting this thing in and out and getting the damage over with, it's just going to sit here